Committee, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Transportation Committee. Are there any bill introductions from the audience or from the committee? Seeing none, we'll turn our attention to the hearing and open the hearing on Senate Bill 333. Adam, can you give us a briefing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 333 would require the Secretary of Transportation to direct a study concerning the use of zipper merges on highways and determine under what circumstances the use of such zipper merges would be optimal for implementation. Additionally, the Secretary would be required to submit a written report to both the Transportation Committees of both the Senate and the House of Representatives on or before March 1st of 2023 concerning the findings of such study. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Committee, are there any questions for Adam? Seeing none, thank you. First proponent we have listed is Senator Tom Hott. Welcome to the committee again.
You know, this is my favorite committee, in addition to the other committees I'm on. So, Chairman Peterson, Vice Chair Claries, Ranking Member Moi, and committee members. I received a request from a long-term constituent, Dr. Betty Stevens, this summer to look into the issue of zipper merging, particularly around construction zones, as some other states have it, and as a way to improve the efficiency of driving, especially when there's traffic, congestion, heavy traffic, and perhaps a way to deal with what I perceive as the quantity and frequency of road rage that many of us often see, maybe all of us see when we're out driving. Dr. Stevens is here. She's former president of Highland Community College, and you know I always do anything I can to be in good with Senator Pyle, that wonderful area up there. This bill actually is one of the things that I want to confess that I like about my job here in the legislature, because I think oftentimes some of the good ideas, not necessarily ones that need to go into statute, but the ones that we spend our time discussing, are the things that constituents mention to us that are problems, and we as legislators look for solutions that might make things for everybody in our state a little bit better. So this was a case. Dr. Stevens is here and is going to give testimony, and when I wrote my testimony, I wasn't sure if she would be able to do that. So I put her email in my testimony. So if you want to read what she had to say when she asked me, why don't we do this in Kansas, she had noticed that it's not in our student driver's handbook, and students are not required to learn this procedure. Being an educator, both of us, that's one of the things I think that we both value highly. I had not really heard the term zipper merge per se. I remember watching one of the TV programs several years ago with Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, where they did a you go, I go, and they used an illustration for political issues of using sort of a zipper merge in terms of how we treat one another. I don't know if we're ready to go with a video, but I thought it might be helpful to people who may be tuning in to our committee. I know we probably have one of the highest Nelson ratings for legislative testimony in the country, and I'm sure there are thousands of people out there watching. So is the video ready to go? Oh, you don't have it? Well, you're being... Yeah, you're being spared unless there's some easy way to do it. If maybe Florence can send you that while I'm talking, and at the end of my testimony we could show it, if that's possible. Rachel was going to do it. So anyway, I'll spare you from what I think was a clever little video, because I'm sure all of you know what zipper merging is, but it's a little different than what I thought it was. when I asked Jill to look into it and when I watched some of the videos explaining it. And KDOT actually did it in 2016 in the KC metro area. And I thought the video that they had really explained it well for the drivers, assuming drivers are not using their social media with the bill we're going to work today, watching that while they were driving. So anyway, as I mentioned, KDOT, I checked with them when this idea came up. They were not terribly excited, and I noticed they're giving testimony in having statutes. They liked having the flexibility, and I'll let them speak for themselves about it. But as I talked to Chairman Peterson, I think there are some advantages to us sending a message to the drivers in Kansas and our citizens, not only about being able to use this technique when there's heavy traffic and we're in congested, particularly construction areas, but also the whole notion of road rage. And again, I want to thank Jill, who researched what other states have done. We have several states, and if you look in the testimony, we don't say there's nothing in Kansas law about it, and we don't really have anything that talks much about it in our Kansas driving handbook or even in the curriculum that the Department of Education has. So I think those are some things that might be worthy of looking into. Illinois does have a law on merging. Minnesota, Missouri, North Carolina, Montana, and New York also have put basically what that law is into their laws. The final thing I want to talk about, and maybe we'll have some discussion on this as we have time to talk about it, and I think it probably fits well with the bill we're going to be dealing with later this morning. I want to make sure we have enough time to deal with that bill on distracted driving and cell phones. But one of our columnists in Manhattan, who's had quite a bit of experience both in journalism and working in state and local government, is Mike Matson, and he does a regular column in the Manhattan Mercury. And one of the ones he had about January 8th, and it's attached to my testimony. I think you might enjoy reading the whole thing. I might read part of it, but it talked about road rage and an observation he had. And the column was called Days of Impulsivity. I'm not going to pronounce that correctly. Impulsivity, apathy, and thinking about thinking. Impulsivity. I knew I would get it. So there are no shoulders on Marlatt Avenue in Manhattan. So I saw the two cars stopped ahead of me. I had no choice but to slow down, stop, then make my way around what was a high-volume confrontation. Apparently, the trailing car honked at the leading car. The driver of the leading car took umbrage sufficient that he slammed on the brakes, exited his vehicle, and led into the honker. My Marlatt road rager was not the outlier. We're surrounded by anger, resentment, sadness, and apathy. The pandemic and its fallout on our existence has forced us into a narrow highway with no shoulders. Talk to the people in the criminal justice system, and you'll hear stories with this common thread. Most people are taking more umbrage these days. Friends in the mental health field tell me disruptions from the norm, from what we know, often leads to a shock that comes with realizing you're unprepared for change. There's a simple but eloquent phrase popular in some additional recovery circles. Think, think, think. The same verb 3 times. The implication is purposely force yourself into the second thought because the first one sucked. So that SOB honked at me for no reason. He's wrong. I'm right, and he needs to know it now. A second thought can allow for a healthier outcome. He honked at me, and yeah, I'm angry, but I'm going to let it slide. When you allow yourself the time to think about thinking, the third thought brings even more clarity and very often introspection. Maybe I should have used my turn signal. He goes on, and I won't read the rest of his editorial, but I'd suggest we do it because I think we do have an increase in road rage. I think we need to encourage our citizens in Kansas to be more courteous when they drive, to leave more space, to let people merge in when they need to. And I think this bill, looking at studying that, might send a good message, and maybe we need a little more in our driver's handbook about it. The signage helps, the education may help, and just maybe we would get our drivers to treat one another better. We could all chill out a little bit and make our highways safer for everybody. So With that, I'll stand for questions, Mr. Chairman. Oh, I do want to, sorry, I don't know if we have the video ready to go yet. Oh, yeah, wonderful. So, it's almost as good as that. Actually, the KDOT video that they did in 2016 in the KC metro area, I thought was actually better than the one I found, but the one I found is shorter, assuming we can get it to play pretty quickly. I don't know what we're going to do once this goes viral, Mr. Chairman, and the social media people have this all over the internet.
To 1. In light traffic, a simple lane change to blend in with the flow keeps traffic moving at normal speeds. When there are low traffic volumes combined with high average speeds, an early merge makes sense, and drivers should do so. As traffic volumes increase, most drivers continue to believe that the earlier they get out of a blocked lane, the better. This is not the case in moderate to heavy traffic, as it begins to create a backlog and possibly bad feelings, as early mergers believe other drivers are bypassing the line and cutting in right before the lane ends. This is not the most effective or safest way to merge in heavier traffic volumes. The zipper merge is the best way to merge in heavier traffic volumes. The zipper merge is when drivers use both lanes fully until they reach the end of the lane, then alternate into the open lane. This maximizes road space and can reduce congestion by as much as 40%. Best of all, everyone gets to where they're going faster. And who doesn't want that?
Thank you. There's the other video. If you look in your background material, this is what was on the website that KDOT had in the Kansas City metro area. And essentially it explains the zipper merge. Most of us think we need to do an early merge if we see a construction zone and we see that sign that shows that traffic needs to move over. And what it's saying, if there's light traffic, doing an early merge, and I noticed I was guilty of this on a recent trip that I had because I had that merge site. I think I was down on I-35 somewhere around the Hutch area or a little further south. And so some people merged right away. And then there's that guy that zips past you all the way down to the end and then wants to get in, and you sort of say to yourself, I hope nobody lets him in because he crowded. And I was a junior high teacher, Senator Dietrich, and you know, you could beat up a kid and you might forgive that, but if you crowded in front of the lunch line or the water fountain line, that was a capital punishment thing. And if as a teacher you didn't stop that crowding, you had big problems. So I think most of us are not programmed to be courteous to what we see as somebody crowding. But the zipper merge says when there's heavy traffic, that's a much more efficient way to do it. So, and I think that the KDOT zipper merge video was an excellent one for that, but I don't think we have time to do that. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions whenever that's appropriate.
And for those watching online or watching the YouTube, there is a way to get to those links for those videos. You go to ks.legislature.org. Tom, you're still going to stand for questions. And then you can click on Senate, committees, go to transportation, and then enter in the date. Questions for Tom? Senator Pittman.
Sorry.
Senator Hawk, I appreciate you bringing this. Just a few questions. Just for those listening, the bill itself doesn't actually make it illegal to do zipper merges or not. It's specifically, the language says, it's very simple, it's 13 lines. It says the Secretary of Transportation shall direct a study concerning the use of zipper merges. So the idea here is you really want for folks in the KDOT to take a look at this because you feel like it's a good, could be a good policy, right?
Yes, and I think they have sufficient authority to do that under current rules and regs and statutes, and have done it in the Kansas City area. I personally would, since particularly after yesterday's presentation, and we're doing really well letting projects and the IKE program, and we're finishing up the T-Works program, I think we'll have more construction projects and we'll see more of the need to have traffic merge into one lane from 2 lanes. And I think some other states do more of this, and Dr. Stevens will probably talk about her traveling experience. So, but before we jump in, and I don't think we probably ought to mandate it, but I think if KDOT studied it, they might see that there are more appropriate places to do it, and several more places where it could apply than just that one we used on Highway 69.
So then the other thing is, when I first heard the bill, I honestly thought it was about merging onto, say, a highway off of a off-road, or coming onto it, coming off of it. But that's not really what this is about. This is a specific technique, especially around construction zones, where we actively, as a state, encourage a certain traffic pattern versus another one where we're taking up both lanes until we need to get in together. It's not all merges all the time. It's not in McDonald's when we have 2 lines and these 2 people go in front of you and you say, well, wait, what? It's not that. It's specifically a dynamic situation, specifically around construction zones, right?
That is correct, and thanks for emphasizing that.
And the last thing I'd say is I absolutely agree that we might even want to think about in this committee talking about road rage, bring it into the discussion in an actual setting, and I don't know what that would look like, and say what's the state of road rage and what are some of the techniques that we might want to be addressing as a state to mitigate that overall, because that's kind of what you're talking about as well. But it's a whole bigger topic than just this one thing, right?
Yes, I think if we educated our drivers, perhaps our young drivers that are doing driver's training, if the driver's handbook had some section about this, I think it's a change in our culture and our mental attitude. You go, I go, let's leave enough space so that if I need to merge in, and instead of saying, when you see that sign that may be a half a mile or a mile away, it's okay to keep both lanes going, and then leave space and be a good neighbor and let each person zipper in.
Thank you. Committee for questions for Senator Hawk. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next on the agenda, we have Betty Stevens from Manhattan. Welcome to the committee, Betty.
It's okay to take the mask off here, huh? Thank you, and thanks Senator Hawk for letting me come today. It was my fault that this happened because I sent a message to him asking if there was anything about this in the law, and he said, well, why don't we talk about that? So he asked me to explain why I suggested to him that the Kansas legislature might explore the potential uses for a zipper merge law in Kansas, and I'm happy to do that. I live in Manhattan, and all my descendants, 2 daughters and their husbands and children, live in Knoxville, Tennessee. So as you can imagine, I like to visit them frequently, so I drive back and forth to Knoxville a few times a year. On one of those trips, maybe in the state of Illinois, I was cruising along, noticed a sign that said a zipper merge ahead, or something like that. I'd never heard of zipper merge, so I paid close attention to the next signs. What I saw was astounding. The cars along the busy highway were merging to the right, one at a time and peacefully. So of course I followed their example, allowing cars in the left lane to merge into the right lane. About a half mile later, as our speed gradually reduced from 65 down to about 50 miles an hour, I noticed that the state highway workers were working in the left lane to repair the road or maybe a bridge at that place. I was impressed that the traffic flowed so smoothly through that temporary narrowing. At the time I was there, all the drivers were observing and following the merge signs. It was not a particularly busy time of day, but the sequential and orderly merging of high-speed traffic was impressive. And there were no highway police cars around to catch offenders. Nobody was slamming on brakes. Nobody was trying to sneak ahead in line. And my drive continued to be smooth and peaceful. I believe that most of the highways in Kansas are not as busy as many of the highways in Illinois, but there may be some spots that could benefit from a law that would allow the creation of temporary zipper merge lanes. I think the cost of creating the use of zipper merging would be small compared to the potential costs of accidents or bad tempers. And that's why I suggested to Senator Hawk that Kansas might want to consider having a law to allow the Highway Department to create and enforce temporary zipper merge lanes in at least certain areas of the state of Kansas, and that such a law might allow for a learning period before being strictly enforced. Thank you for keeping Kansas roads safe and up to date, and for allowing me to speak to you today.
Committee questions for Betty Stevens. Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens. Thanks for being here. What did you notice on your trip, probably in Illinois, in terms of courtesy of the drivers relative to the zipper merge? Do you feel like this was different than what you observed without those zipper merge signs?
Yes, indeed, and I thought it was wonderful. It's usually a quiet trip anyway. They're good roads and good signage. But I was impressed that everybody was doing it. It wasn't particularly busy, but everybody was doing it. They were going to the side in order. And I thought that's pretty cool. And most of the drivers were from Illinois by license tags. So I was the outsider.
Committee, further questions? Thank you for your coming and presenting testimony. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next, we have Bert Morey, Division of Policy at KDOT. Or Joel Skelly, one of the two.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Bert Morey. I'm the Deputy Secretary and State Transportation Engineer. Now I understand the question about policy this morning. I'm not the Director of Policy. I'm the State Transportation Engineer. I'm just going to talk real quick about what we've got going on in regards to zipper merge. You've got the testimony in front of you, which has got some details in it, but I'll tell you just a little bit about what it is, expand on the video, which was really good. That was a great explanation of what it is. It's for construction zones. And it allows, when you have high capacity or high volumes, it allows for more utilization of the two existing lanes. I'll talk about when it's appropriate, our experience, a little bit of feedback that I got from my counterpart in Missouri, and then moving forward. So again, there's some criteria here in the testimony that we provided. But generally we do this, or this is useful when traffic volumes are about 1,500 vehicles per hour per lane, okay? In Kansas, that's limited to just a few highways, US 69 south of 435, K10 between Lawrence and Kansas City, and then K96 down in Wichita. Generally, our traffic in a single lane doesn't approach that 1,500 vehicles an hour, and you can run them through with the normal early lane drop that we use. We did, as everybody said, we did do a zipper merge on US 69 in about 2016. It wasn't terribly well received, and I believe the reason was just because of unfamiliarity. People were not familiar with seeing this. We didn't do a good job of education beforehand. And so this was something new, and it really does depend on those people leaving that gap in the through lane so that the other folks can get in there. Other experiences, I just reached out briefly to my counterpart in Missouri, and they do use those in the Kansas City metropolitan area occasionally, and he related the same issues that I just explained. You kind of have to get people educated. I think it would be good to have it in the state driver handbook that this is something that a driver might see. I think some public service announcements talking about this in advance, if we do choose to do this again, would be very helpful. Moving forward, we continue to monitor the work zones that we have coming up, and this is a tool that we have available right now. We just have not used it very much. So I think that's a pretty quick testimony, but I would be happy to stand for questions.
Committee questions. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So besides educating students who are taking driver's training, I'm not sure that this technique is listed in the driver's training curriculum for our instructors. Because I haven't seen it in a few years, but I just don't think there's any mention of zipper.
Probably not.
Yeah, just regular merge.
This has only been around for 15 years, something like that, I think.
So there's just another step in that process. I think if we want to study this, you probably need to look at the folks who are teaching driver training. I'm not sure they're aware of it either.
Yeah, I would agree.
Thank you.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think both Joel said this and I heard you say this. You don't need statutory authority to do zipper merge. Do you need rules and reg authority, or do you already have that authority the way we're set up right now?
Yes, we could implement it tomorrow if the conditions met it.
No, I want to make sure that we don't get too while this I think is a great idea, I want to make sure we don't get too rambunctious and have an unintended consequence of making this too complicated if you already have the authority and the ability and the willingness to use it where appropriate. So thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Pittman.
Thanks for coming here, Mr. Morey. If we were to go forward with even some kind of minor study, do you see it having a major fiscal impact on your organization at this point?
No.
Even if it's cursory at first and then a deeper dive, or even if it's a review for this committee on those types of things, do you think you could pull it off within your current budget?
Mr. Moore, I think you probably have already done a little bit of studying, because I see here that in your testimony that you have developed criteria and guidelines for when you can perform these functions.
Right. I mean, yes, before 16, we did some research to determine, where it's appropriate to do that. And I think that was probably reactionary to other states using zipper merges, that we were proactive and said, okay, Minnesota's doing this. Is it applicable anywhere in Kansas? And we kind of put some criteria together working with those other states and what they do.
Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. Very concise. That's very nice. Will you do this study without this bill?
I mean, not formally, but I think we do ongoing research to tell us what the most appropriate traffic control methods are for work zones or even regular traffic control. So I think it's an ongoing learning process, but I don't think formally we would embark on this study.
So you would need this for us to move forward with this idea, and it's all right with you?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
It's...
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Maury? Senator Hawk.
Just one more comment, and I want to stress what you said, Mr. Chairman. If you go to the materials that are on the website, I want to really compliment KDOT. I don't know who did your video, but it's a minute and 27 seconds long, and it's excellent video. It has some cartoon characters you can see on the part of your testimony, or part of my testimony, and I just want to make sure KDOT gets credit, because I think this was an excellent video and it was tailored to Kansas, and I think part of my agenda was to encourage drivers to be more courteous, to chill out, kind of tamp down road rage, and this does it in a humorous way that I think would encourage motorists to do that if they're in a heavy traffic area, and maybe, again, as you say, If it's a late merge situation, you have to leave the space in there, and it did a great job of pointing that out. So just kudos to KDOT for that.
Thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Morey? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Committee, that's all the testimony we have. Are there anybody in the audience wishing to present neutral testimony? Anybody wishing to present opponent testimony? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing and I'd like to turn our attention to working Senate Bill 332. Adam, if you could give us a quick briefing on that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 332 would create a new traffic infraction for individuals under the age of 18, would be prohibited from using a mobile telephone while operating a motor vehicle, and also for all individuals driving through either a school zone or a construction zone would be prohibited from using a mobile telephone with certain exceptions that exist in the bill.
Are there questions for Adam on the bill? Fairly recent hearing. Seeing none, thank you. Committee, there was one amendment requested, or that was proposed, and I requested that I have it drafted. It was to limit this in the construction zones to while workers are present. Adam, did you get that drafted?
I do.
I would like to offer that amendment. Senator Hawk.
I'd like to second that, if you need a second at this time.
Yes. Is there any discussion on the amendment? It's simply to allow, so when you're driving down the road and the workers aren't in the construction zones, it's not a violation to have it in your hand. Senator Pittman.
I'll just say I'm in support of this amendment, Mr. Chair. Thanks for offering it.
Senator Cluse.
How do we determine that, whether or not people are in the zone? Workers, I mean, sometimes they're off in the ditch, sometimes you don't see them. I mean, what signals that they're active?
Well, if you wanted to be safe, you would just run hands-free when you're running through construction zones. But this would take those inadvertent times when people aren't, the highway patrol would have to look to see whether people were present or not. Or the law enforcement, would be my guess. Any further questions? Senator Hawk.
I would assume another time might be if you're driving late at night, you could pretty well assume that there were not workers present in that zone. So, yeah, and I would agree with you totally that I would hope that the drivers would just comply with this, whether workers were present or not. But I think it might take some of the heartburn away from people who were driving in some of those situations where it was very clear nobody was present, and they would not want to think that they were in a tough spot legally, even though their first year is an education year anyway.
I would think that at night it would be easy to see the lights the workers are using to know that they're there at night. There's a lot of bridge raising I know been going on the turnpike, and there's nobody there at night. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Amendment is adopted. We're back on the bill. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill? Senator Hawk.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we send Senate Bill 332 out as amended, favorable for passage.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Cluse. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Do you wish your no to be recorded? Committee, that's all I had for today. Next week, we're going to start on a bill on autonomous drivings. I expected at least 2 days of hearings. I don't remember what was on the agenda after that. I think I had one other thing. Just check the calendar. We are not meeting on Monday. With that, we are adjourned.